Welcome to Stars Podcast, your growth mindset mecca. We are all about self-leadership principles here at Stars Podcast. Our guests come from all over the world with very unique stories of how they hacked their way into success. As you'll quickly find out, nothing happens overnight. And as always, enjoy the journey. Hey, welcome back to all you longtime listeners, and welcome to the family if you're a first-timer here. Today we have a special guest coming in, Powers, aka NiftyDreaming.ETH, co-founder of ESPOS NFT. She comes from New York City and a longtime marketer, Web 1, Web 2, and now into Web 3. She understands the meaning of community as well as an initiative of global warming and all types of different reasons why she thinks NFTs and the blockchain are the future. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. How are the holidays for you?
Oh, it's been really lovely. It's been really mellow. But
Same. Alyssa and I have watched, we're totally caught up on The Witcher. We watched Don't Look Up. I think was it?
Oh, I watched that one too. That was wild. It was kind of depressing, but it was good.
But how funny.
It's crazy. And it's a great comment on where we are right now. It's like, we know the earth is going to die, but we're not doing anything about it.
But we're like, let's sing and dance. And I can't remember. Is that Ariana Grande, the one that's singing?
It really is.
Yeah, yes. I thought so. And she's like, just fucking look up or something like that.
Right.
Just listen to the facts. And I'm like, oh my God, I love this.
Yeah. And Meryl Streep was pretty fantastic. And Leonardo. I mean, they were all great. It was really, really fun to watch. They were just being silly.
Yeah, and I just walked upstairs in between because I had an interview before this, and I walked upstairs and she's watching Titanic. I said, and then earlier today we were watching Home for Christmas, maybe something like that. Anyhow, the same characters that were in movies that we watched last night were in movies we were watching today, and not even like on the same channel. It was just that's our that's our trajectory this weekend.
I'm planning to do the Matrix trilogy the next 3 days.
Oh, we got caught up on the Matrix and then watched the Matrix Resurrection yesterday as well.
Looking forward.
I just glossed over that part. Yeah. It has been a lot of deep couch sitting.
That's all right.
And it has been fantastic.
Yeah. So, well, good. So, where do we start? And I'm sorry, I haven't listened to anything. I got busy and I checked out a little bit. I got and get discouraged with NFTs, but I'm back.
Oh, you got a little discouraged and upset?
Well,
listen, I'm not far behind you, so
yeah, I mean, it's a roller coaster, right? It's like, and it's easy, and also just life. It's easy to get distracted. So when you have you're a little discouraged and then there's a million other things going on. But then last week I listened to the Shiny show and he had on a whole group of people that were so fascinating. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. This is so exciting to be here. So. Yeah.
And that is sort of how it goes with me too, is I seem to feel like everybody tries to keep up with the Joneses for a while. And then it's I hear the same stuff over and over again. We all start speaking the same language and then ugh.
Yeah.
Can I just not be involved in this for a little bit? But no, it's all been good. I mean, like you said, this is a brand new space, totally shiny, new, ready to be broken. And I think we're breaking it and fixing it and all of those things. So it's a land of creativity, though, that's for sure. I was looking last night, just I think Vicky is the one who posted it from the she does Mutant Mondays. Okay. If you're familiar with her show. No. She does Mutant Mondays, and she's a big part of the Bored Ape Yacht Club. And under her post, she was like, hey, just wanted to see what's out there. I'm not saying I'm going to buy anything, but here's a thread for you to post your artwork on. And I tell you, I look down through that stuff and it's so reassuring. There's so much good work out there that it's a lot of fun that those are the hallways that I get to walk every day, Right. Yeah,
That
it's
is
like
really
whenever I go to my daughter's school and I'm walking through during the holiday time and they always have artwork up. And
cool.
it's hard to get me out of that school because I will sit there and I will look at everybody's artwork
Right.
and I will read who it's by and I will read the messages. And like
Mhm.
me in a museum, you, I go to a museum to go to a museum.
Right. Right.
You're not going to get me at, like, we're not just going to check a box. Like, I'm here because I'm just so curious about so many different things
Yeah.
that it's hard for me not to give it the time that I think it deserves.
Yeah.
And I'll sit there and I'll read and I'll look and all those things.
Well, it's interesting, and I think I'm going to come full circle because this year, oh my God, 2021, I had gotten laid off last year on December 23rd was my last day at my job. And I spent like January, February, March, like listening to Clubhouse because I was lonely and it was a pandemic and like, what the heck, right? So, so I started, and that's how I got into the NFTs. And I was just blown away by, people that were talking about how they were using crypto to like send money to their grandmother in some bankless country. That kind of stuff. And I got some early pieces by Pac and things like that that were just like mind blowing. So yeah, and then uh my husband and I had worked on a drop for we were planning I applied to all of them and we didn't, there was just so much happening so quickly. March it was like this huge flurry of activity. Flurry, yes. And but by the time we got ready in May, the market had kind of tanked on art. And we were supposed to be doing something on Nifty Gateway, and they were, you know, understandably, they were concerned about like having too many open editions and having like the sales were just like going down, down, down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so when it was our turn, the market was not in a great place, and they were just at that point we were just filler, and it wasn't presenting the artwork, so we pulled out. It wasn't presenting the artwork well. And we did the launch ourselves in November when things started to pick up again. But all through the summer, it seemed like, the most exciting thing that was happening was, the Bored Apes,
Yeah.
and, we had some really interesting conversations around like scarcity, and the whole thing with the Bored Apes was that each one's different. And then I do think the copyright thing is really interesting as well. That you can, that you own your ape and can make derivatives from that. So there are
Do you
interesting.
love that part though? That there's so many narratives that can come out of one story.
I mean, I think what's so interesting with NFTs and with crypto is the kind of disruption it's having to the economics,
Mm.
that like somebody bought, I mean, I was hanging out with Silly Tuna, and he bought a punk in, I don't know, whatever year it was, and then sold it. And there I was, on Twitter Spaces when he sold it for 12 million on Sotheby's. And or was that Christie's? I think it was Sotheby's. Nonetheless, the fact that this guy who's, a coder, like suddenly makes millions of dollars, it's really interesting. And with the Bored Apes, I can take issue, like, I'm coming from the art world looking at this, and it's like it doesn't really do it for me. For me, it's kind of like, oh well, so these are just trading cards for, but on the other hand, it's like it's giving people tremendous opportunity. People who have been locked out of like the financial gains of the stock market and VC capitalists and, that kind of thing, like they suddenly have an opportunity. See, I could luck out and buy the thing for $500 that turns into 50,000. I mean, that's the whole crypto story right now is these kind of get rich quick. Everybody's hoping they'll be the one, and I can't blame them. I mean, it's exciting,
Yeah,
but
it's very exciting and it's happening time and time again. But something that you mentioned there, um, you're coming at it from the art world, and you said that these are more like trading cards for that project. And that's something too, that there's so many applications for NFTs that it's just a piece of the puzzle
mhm.
of how you do business. Like they're obviously doing merchandise and they're doing movies and games and all of these things that are coming out of that project. Um, so the NFT itself, and this is why I liked your project too, and I've heard it since we talked the last time. I've heard it said 2 different times that the NFT is the receipt.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I've heard that. And that was because Marianne Powers told me that, because that is what their whole entire project is basically about. And I was like, how stinking cool is that? And I even took it like in the evolution inside my head. I was like, hey, listen, so if you have a business, and let's just say that, you sell bagels, you just sell bagels,
Mm-hmm.
but at your store, the receipt for your bagel purchase is an NFT that's from an artist from your area.
Yeah.
That you can literally do collaborations to that level. And then now you have, okay, so instead of having a punch card, now I have my NFT wallet. And after I get 10 of these different artists, then I go to this art exhibit, and now that's my access pass, because those 10 little things added up to this one other token that got airdropped to me, to now I can go to an event.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, there's so many ways
yeah,
to go after it.
To a degree, I mean, that's where the Bored Apes are, right? Like you show that you have the receipt, and now I can go and make derivatives, but I can also attend events, and like it acts as this like social access. But yeah, and where, honestly, the piece of art could end up disappearing or changing. I love pieces that change over time, or like, how people's human one is like, he's planning to refresh that art over time. So yeah, you're buying the receipt, but you're not really buying the art. And so,
but the art is the receipt.
Right.
Like, that's the craziest part, and why you threw me for a mind spin the last time we spoke, because I've been reeling on that. I got notes here. We talked about so many different things, and that was like the one thing that I'm just like, yeah, that's right. Because I use it. I use their tokens, like in our project, I'm using those tokens to give them other tokens because they have the receipt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is where it gets a little weird for art. For digital art, this is just revolutionary, right? I can see the transition from like, okay, we had paintings, and then we had photography, and then we had film, and film even itself, like, and photography over the last century had to kind of prove itself as an art form. But if for digital artists, it was nearly impossible to sell a piece of original work, right? I mean, photography could make the print, like it was a print, you printed it using the chemistry of traditional photography. And so each print was unique. But, photography had that angle of like, well, you could always print more of these. Paintings were paintings, they were one of one. And film, you could make more prints of a film. But digital art, like, you could just right click save, right? So how could you sell it? And here's, Postmasters downtown in Soho, like, have been trying to sell digital art since the 80s. And now you have a way that you can prove you have a receipt for that piece of art. Yes. So now you can create the scarcity of a digital object, but you can totally manipulate that scarcity, right? So you can make it a one of one on Super Rare, or you can make it an open edition, or it really, like, for me, art is the easy part. Anything can be art. The hard part is what value you put on it, and how much money, like, like a kid's drawing is a piece of art, but are you going to spend a lot of money on that? Or, a Basquiat, oh, there's only one of these, and even though that kid's drawing, there's only one. But it's the value, it's how much we think things are worth that is really,
and it's so arbitrary. Right, because exactly. It's so arbitrary that we even assign value to pieces of paper that have our former presidents on it, like, right, that are backed by a thing that come out of the ground that we said was precious metal.
Yes.
Like, it's all so arbitrary when you break it down into like what it really is.
Right.
And that's why certain artwork is what it is, because it's arbitrary. It's so funny when, like, you want to get almost on a soapbox as to why this is worth what it's worth. And then at the same time, you're like, well, really, it could be worth nothing also.
Right. Yes.
So once I can say that it's both, I can live in the middle a bit.
Right. Yeah. So for me, the art piece is like when people, and I would love it like back on Clubhouse back earlier this year, and people like, well, what is art? And I'd be like, that's
Yeah.
easy. That is so easy. It is everything, anything that people make that has thought into it, like anything. But what is money is the really interesting question, and it completely controls our lives. It controls everything, and it's just a concept. We have all agreed that money, that this is worth something, and therefore I will give you $5 million for it because, and what are the $5 million for? Oh, because now I can go buy a yacht or a house or a, whatever. But, and all of that money is controlled by people. It is controlled by the stock market. I mean, even in the art world, right? I mean, it has always been, there's an art world establishment that decides that that piece of art is worth 5 million and this one is not worth anything. And then you've got the stock market, and you've got all these thousands and millions of people running around like, why is the stock worth money? I don't know. Why is that stock worth money? Because
Yeah.
the CEO got a big bonus this year. Like,
well, in all honesty, so it's worth money because it's providing a service for the population at large.
yeah.
And it's providing something that we want. And because we vote with our dollars, we have given it that type of power.
Yeah.
And we said that, yeah, that's important to us. Like a soda company. Why do they get to own stadiums and everything that we drink? It's because we drink it.
Because we do it, because we spend our money on it.
Because we spend our money on it. And we say that company is giving us value. So that's why they are publicly traded. It's like, it's so weird though. But at the same time, if we don't spend our money on it, like a Blockbuster, we stop going and renting movies, or we stop going to the local ice cream stand, like they shut down and they go away.
Well, so this takes me in two different directions. So one is like, I mean, crypto is so disruptive to the entire like concept of money, right? And it's so funny when you have people who are like, well, I don't understand blockchain, so it doesn't exist. And it's like, well, honestly, I don't understand money other than the fact that we believe the US government is telling us that these dollars are worth something. So here you comes like a Bitcoin, and oh my God. So I was telling you, I was a little discouraged and distracted. I dial into one of these Twitter spaces last week, and here's the mayor of Miami, also a couple Cuban artists. The Cuban artists are talking about how NFTs have given them artistic freedom. And the mayor of Miami is talking about how crypto is this huge disruptor that could impact governments, that could impact Cuba, that could impact China. China's trying to like shut down crypto, but and places where they've had such tight control of money, crypto gets around that. Right? It allows you to
in a
find another
millisecond.
way.
Yeah, in a millisecond, it gets over it.
Yeah. Yeah. If somebody bought a Bitcoin, 10 years ago, and now it's worth, who knows what. But
well, and the part to me that's really concerning, and something that we need to pay attention to as crypto enthusiasts and as NFT enthusiasts, is their ability to control the websites that we can go on and not go on as a government agency. And that's how they're able to shut things down. So yes, there are ways around that with VPN and all of those quote unquote illegal things. But it's like, if the government itself is control, like once you lose control of the money, you lose control of the people. That's just simply put. And that's why I find the tokenomics of all of these NFT projects so fascinating, because the conversation has shifted away from the artsy side of it and the movement side and the renaissance that we've been having, to taxes and government and big business. And how do we fit that big thing into these little square pegs? And I'm like, why do you want to?
Yeah.
Like, why do you want to be like, to prove to the masses that it's real? Is that really why? Or can we just have it as the currency for our community, which is crypto? Like, why do we have to make it so fucking big all the time? Sorry. Like, why does it always have to be like that?
Well, I think that I'm going to guess that the US government is going to add just enough legislation to allow like a new stock market, right? Like they're going to have just enough regulation that people still want to invest in it, people still want to get rich on it. And unfortunately, like, we don't regulate our stock market. I'm a fan of Elizabeth Warren, and do feel like the stock market has, I think it's unfair that we leave things so unregulated that it leaves many people in a difficult position unreasonably. Nonetheless, I don't think they're gonna. I don't think they can let crypto run rampant, but I think they want to add just enough so that, like, you wouldn't want to be China. You wouldn't want to regulate it out of existence because people will just buy it someplace else. They'll just move it offshore. Like, whatever it is, they will just find another way. Like, the world is too small now. So if you don't get on the train, you're going to get left behind. So I think the US government is going to want to make it look like a stable, reasonable solution that they can, maybe they can even get their own little cream off the top. So everybody wants to eat at this table. So,
and I think it is important to have some regulation just to make it safer.
Yeah.
I get that part of it. And that's why I think that they have a place at the table for healthcare and all of those things that are more of a public interest.
Yeah.
Just to make them safe and not to have people get scammed out of so many dollars. But at the same time, it's like, I try and look at it from both sides of it, because as soon as you let regulation happen, it just doesn't stop.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the concern for me would be, this is where, like, it is totally a roller coaster. Like, you look at, it's the whales, right? There's 8 whales that are controlling the whole market, and is that fair? We don't want to have another system where, like, everything is manipulated and quite a few people, when the stock market crashes and they say, oh, we lost, billions of dollars, that billions of dollars wasn't lost. It went to somebody. It just didn't go to the rest of us. It went to someone.
It wasn't equally distributed. I'll tell you that much.
So I was listening to Planet Money on NPR last week. I love listening to that podcast. And they were talking about the Great Resignation. Because, I mean, I was laid off, but I also was, like, miserable at my job last year. So it was like oops, hey, you still there?
Yep.
Okay.
I was writing a note and I must have pushed a button on my computer. I need a flat top that goes over my actual computer while I'm doing these, because I don't have, like, room to be moving everything around. So I just write on the little pad area.
Oh,
it's not big enough.
So I was listening to Planet Money on NPR, and they were talking about the Great Resignation, and, being really honest about my situation last year. Like, I was laid off, but I was miserable at my job. Like, there was, I know why they laid me off, because I was very unhappy. Which had been building up for tens and tens of years. But here's what they were saying on NPR. It was really cute. They said it wasn't the Great Resignation. They said it was the Great Renegotiation. And I thought this was fascinating because, by extension from what they were saying, there were, by example, they had, interviewed a bunch of people, and they said, oh, this guy couldn't find anybody at $14 an hour, but when he raised it to $16 an hour, he was able to do it. And, people that were like, I'm just going to take some time off, but if the right job came along, I would take it. And that's how I feel right now. I've been consulting all year, and I'm just waiting for the right thing. And I think that's just it. We've all reprioritized. Like, I would rather spend time with my family and take care of my health. It's just not worth it when I don't feel like the company has been loyal to me, right? Like, they expect my loyalty. They expect me to work hard, and I work 60 hours a week. I get no raises. I get no promotions. I get, like, I've had this problem for years and years working in the advertising industry, where it's just, we put in so much time, and now I'm in my mid-50s and I don't see the path forward. So I'm looking for a career change, honestly.
Understood.
And one that will allow me to have more time with my family and take care of my health, and not work 60 hours a week for a job that doesn't pay. I mean, it paid well, but you kind of hit a limit where it's like, it's just not worth it anymore.
Absolutely. And as far as the renegotiation side of it, that conversation, like, were they saying that more of that conversation is being driven by the applicant than the company itself. They're like the applicant can say, hey, I don't mind so much about the money side, but I need this as far as like flexibility goes. Was that more the conversation that's happening?
It was kind of anecdotal, but there was definitely a part of it where it was the applicants have more control in the negotiation now than they had before. And they are asking for things like better health care or more time off or more money. And that some companies were seeing that and responding to that and saying, you know what, all right, what can we do to attract more talent to work at our company? And yeah, that's definitely where my head is. I don't want to work 60 hours a week anymore.
Yeah, that's what my buddy was telling me. He was saying that the applicants, when he's interviewing with them, so one of the very first questions they ask is it remote? Do I have to come to an office? He said if I would require people to come to an office at this point, he goes, I would never get anybody to work.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be at home.
Yeah. And it was interesting. They had a statistic from LinkedIn where they said last year, like 1 in 60 jobs was remote, and now it's like 1 in 6.
Oh, I bet. And people want to say that they don't know about the metaverse. They're like, this is the metaverse right here.
This is it. This is
we've been living there for 2 years now, guys. Welcome. Some of us have been here our whole lives, playing around on AOL chat rooms and even before that in DOS and Oregon Trail and all those things that I grew up on. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was early internet as well and made some early websites. I made my first website I think was for Pringles and maybe it was Amstel. I forget which one I did first, but nonetheless. And then, helped with Volvo cars and IBM.com and helped build all these early websites.
Yeah, because you were early web 2.0, like you were developing.
I started out as a producer producing games. I started out doing Star Trek games. I was doing interactive movies for Star Trek. And I mean, first off, always a Trekkie. My dad was a software engineer for a defense company for decades.
And he founded a new metal that they use on spaceships.
Yeah.
Like we'll just gloss over that real quick.
Yeah. So yeah, he studied nuclear chemistry and he discovered an aluminum isotope and supposedly went out to Area 51 and tested the ship that they found and stuff like that. But so always kind of a techie. Actually grew up in a family of artists. My mom is she was a master potter. My brother's a sculptor. And I studied photography and film, came to New York, and because I knew how to use the computer, I started producing games. And it was so great because we were just figuring it all out. Like nobody knew how to make a website. We just kind of whiteboarded it out. Like, I guess we'll want here's what a UX would look like, and here's what we think the homepage needs to have on it. Like everything was just a whiteboard, and we had a couple developers, and I taught myself. I actually started out as a receptionist and taught myself how to make Flash animations.
Love it.
So yeah, it's been really interesting, but I think the thread has always been right here. We are at like Web3, and is it going to be? There's this roller coaster. It's like, oh my God, this is going to save the world. Like, this is fantastic. Democratization of art, access to financial freedom, all this great stuff. And then there's like, oh, but it's just a bunch of fintech guys like trading apes, like, and they're all colluding, and it's like just going to make a few people really rich. And, so there's this roller coaster. And the truth is, it's both. Like when I started with the internet, it was like, wow, freedom of information to everybody in the world. This is going to be fantastic. And, and like Web 2, like, oh, hey, we can connect with people online, except it can also be weaponized against us, And here we are with Web 3 and like the metaverse and crypto and NFTs. And some of it's going to be really amazing, and some of it's going to be not so great. I mean, yeah. I'm worried about Meta, Mark Zuckerberg's Meta.
Talk about a stab in the I don't know how I feel about it yet. I don't know what it's going to be. All I do know is I don't understand why so the way that it was explained to me too was the way that they filed for Meta, because there are other people out there that own Meta.
Yeah.
And the way that they filed for it was so vague. So whatever they ended up getting pushback on, they could sort of put that aside and then go in a different direction and still move it forward, while not really paying the respect that was due to those who have been building Meta.
Yeah.
So that was one part of it that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And then the other part too, similar to what you're talking about, is like, some of it's going to be great. Some of it's going to be amazing. But at the same time, it's not a cure all. Like, even if you look at Web 2.0, what did it, like, for a business itself, it allowed us to expand like really easily. But the connection piece is really where I fell in love with the internet, was like our ability to connect with people that aren't in our immediate circle. But now we hear about the algorithm and how it's like that is weaponized against us almost. Like, they know, and this was the sort of the funny part about that movie last night was Don't Look Up, was they're a like, he's like, I know how you're going to die. Like, I know what you want to buy before you want to buy it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I had a conversation with my friend over lunch the other day, and we were talking about how anytime that, you have your phone and it's listening, so it knows, and then it feeds into it. And it's like, yeah, I get commercials about things I spoke about.
I keep thinking about this one clubhouse that I joined earlier this year, and it was like a metaverse group. And we were talking about AI. And so this blew my mind. Okay, so we talked about AI, and there's machine learning versus kind of neural, like, could you, in the 70s, what they were trying to do was make a computer that worked like the human brain, and they kept trying, but they didn't know enough about the human brain. Like, nobody really knows how the brain works, so they couldn't make a computer that could be like that. But the other way was machine learning, right? So you just needed huge amounts of data. So come the 2000, and now Google and Facebook have tons of data, and they can make algorithms. And what they do with that data, I mean, like, this guy was saying how he was at Facebook and they could tell by somebody's history when they were going to get a divorce or when they were going to find a new mate. And I was like, wow, they can predict that, right? But they can't predict, like, when you're going to have cancer. Oh, because we haven't captured that much healthcare data to say, like, oh, somebody that has all of these things is gonna, I mean, I know we're coming along with it, but it's how we've used this technology is not really.
Yeah, it's where are our priorities? Our priorities are obviously like,
yeah, it's not really serving humankind, right?
No,
I mean,
nope. That's sort of what I'm getting at, is we run it from a very capitalistic viewpoint. And this is why I love the movie Don't Look Up so much last night, because they were poking at all the wounds that are open about the East, or the Western way of living.
Yeah
is very capitalistic and self-serving. And I'm like, and then the ultimate demise was and spoiler alert, was a meteor or asteroid, I don't know which is which,
a comet, whatever,
smashes into Earth and vaporizes it. Because we thought we could pull out minerals from the asteroid.
And more important to to try to capitalize on that
instead of like divert it away. And
I mean, it definitely feels like all of the decisions that are made every day by all of us, right? It's like there's no one big bad conspiracy. It's just all the little things that all of the people do. And some of the people have more power, and some of those decisions they're making they're just a little self-serving, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna get a bigger bonus this year because I'm a CEO and I manipulated my earnings report so that it would look good so I can increase the stock. So everybody's happy and I get a bonus. But meanwhile, like, I had to lay off a bunch of people. We actually have a kind of slightly crappier health insurance, for millions of people that work at my company, whatever it is, right? Nobody's really held accountable to any of that. And and so I'm, dare I say it, I'll say it out loud, socialist at heart. I like Bernie Sanders. I believe in kind of like there are bare minimums that we should be providing to people. Education, healthcare. There are like these things that we think are critical to humankind out of just caring about people, and climate change, which is going to require all of the resources we have.
Oh
And
my
that's not
God.
going to happen if we wait for the capitalists to do it. Like
Yeah.
they will just, that's what that movie's making fun of, is that like, oh, if we leave it to the capitalists to go explore space, they will do it to their own profit. They
Right.
will always be, anyway. So the Jim Webb, on a better note,
Ah.
that the Webb telescope is up.
You don't want to get into the boys going up into space and looking at the horizon. You don't want to talk about those. All of the millionaires and billionaires going up there for funsies.
I thought that the Richard Branson flight was a little more interesting. I thought that the technology he used was more interesting.
Yeah.
The that stupid looking rocket that Bezos has like makes me giggle every time I look at it. It's funny that he's like sending celebrities up there for a little joyride. Like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. But I'm thrilled that the Jim Webb telescope is up there.
Same.
And I think this is it, man. I think 2022 is the year that the aliens find us.
Well, so it's going to take them 6 months to get to where it's going to be.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with the Jim Webb Space Telescope over the summer. And come to find out, this thing has been underneath my nose for 20 years. Is a little bit irritating to me that it wasn't more well known.
Right. Yeah.
Like, this is monumental in our existence. And it barely trended yesterday.
Oh my God.
And I get it that it's Christmas, and I understand it's the holidays, but like, maybe I'm just not in the community. Maybe I'm just not involved in it enough. But I even looked on on Twitter where, it was only shared like maybe 1,000 times.
Yeah, I had to like search for posts about it as well.
I'm like, what is happening?
So, I mean, I had first read about it in the New Yorker article that showed up last year, and it was a long article with all the details about how hard these people have worked for decades to make this happen. And yeah, I'm thrilled. I'm just so happy that it's up there. And yeah, I think this is the beginning of us finding out if there's other life out there, which I'm sure there is.
There has to be. Well, I'm super excited about it because in my day-to-day, I sell infrared cameras. So I know all about infrared detectors and why this thing is coated in gold and why it has to be cooled the way that it has to be cooled and why they had to use beryllium and the whole thing. Like, I'm so geeking out over it because it is the most powerful infrared detector known to man. Yeah. And now I can point to that as like, guys, look, this is what can be accomplished. And to understand the science behind it is really like all we're looking at are heat signatures. We're looking at infrared radiation, which is excited electrons. Right. That's all we're looking for. And it's like it can be that simple. And the way that we're gonna do it is 13.1 billion years ago. Right. Like that's how far we're gonna be able to see. That's just incredible to me. So and it's the first advancement in space photography since we launched the Hubble Space Telescope in the 90s. Yeah. Which
my mother's brother, my uncle, he was like an early satellite guy. Like he was sending up satellites in the 70s. Is that possible? Okay? Yeah. Like, so I went to visit my aunt recently and there's all like photographs all over their house of satellites. And I'm like, this is so weird. Like, and they're old photographs. So it was like late 70s, early 80s, I think, when he first, and he made some money selling data transfers. And I'm sure he must have sold out early because he didn't get that much money, but that was his business.
But I'll tell you, just to be involved, and that's how I feel a lot about what we're doing right now as beta testing this system of NFTs and crypto is like, it's so young, and we're like, a lot of people are cashing out now and doing all these transfers and making some money now, which is good. I think it's great. It's just like what brought me into it was, like you said, that democratizing artwork and democratizing the space, because outside of it, like the private industry has like sort of soured my mouth a little bit in that respect, because it's very, very few can participate. But with the internet, as much as it's good because you can participate, it's also bad because everybody can participate. So like you're always trying. So depending on like what your goal is your goal to be massively huge, or is it to make this work and just put it out there and make a living? That's going to that'll determine how well you like it, because like it's a long grind.
So my brother's a very, he's an established artist, and he went to Yale, and he got his master's in sculpture, and he's the dean at UC Riverside, and he's had a solo show at the Whitney Museum, and so he's very much on the inside of the art world, but it's a struggle, like it's always a struggle, and but he's got a lot of integrity. He makes great work. He's well spoken on his work. But still, he's now in his 60s, and he's challenged by, like he didn't make it. He didn't make it to the top, and so like where does that put him? And I'm so disappointed for him because he did work so hard. And then on the other hand, like my husband, who, started out as a graffiti artist, and I was the first person he met who he's like, well, I want to be an artist. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, because I had an artist in my family.
Yeah.
And he started a studio practice, wrote books about graffiti, still does a lot of murals. And so he does outdoor public commissions. He does like commercial work as well. Like he did, record albums and record covers. But also a big piece of what he's done is on Instagram, and he has a huge following on Instagram, and he makes a painting and then he puts it on Instagram, and everybody's like, oh, I like, lots of likes. And then he'll make a print from it, and he can sell the print through his shop in Brooklyn. And he can make a limited edition of 100 and put it at a reasonable price, and so it becomes very accessible. And he has been shown at the Brooklyn Museum, at the SF MoMA. He's had group shows all over the world. He's had solo shows all over the world. But there's something about, like, why are you making the art? What is the purpose, right? Are you doing it to try to be that Damien Hirst, or are you doing it because you like making art and you want that art to be accessible to people? And so we find ourselves in that kind of outsider world of being accessible art, and the NFTs are allowing for that, because we can make editions and people can buy the editions, and gosh, it's interesting in so many ways. Like one of the talks, I went to NFT NYC, I can't remember who was talking about it, but they were saying how, there was two billionaires at a dinner. One's a rich guy, old guy, and another is a crypto guy. And the rich guy's like, well, I have 9 mansions around the world, and the young guy's like, I just stay in hotels everywhere. Like, I don't, why you got to change all those light bulbs? You got all those houses you got to take care of. And, and the old guy's like, well, I need to put all my art, and then the other guy's like, well, all my art's on my phone. Like, I don't even have to put anything in storage. I can just fly to the next city. I want to go to Paris. I'm going to go check into a nice hotel. I don't have to carry anything with me or worry about taking care of this piece of art. I have it all. And I think it's interesting. I mean, our audience is, young people, and maybe they live in an apartment. They don't have that much room for art. Like, maybe it does make sense to have art on your phone. Or you can put it on your screen in your living room, which I haven't seen a lot of people doing that, but as an extension from painting to prints to, like, now you can have animated paintings. You can take, I mean, Steve's work is very much storytelling. He actually uses a lot of words in it. So to be able to take that and make it into a story, that's animated, I think is really interesting.
Yeah, and almost too, like with the crypto guy, and the illustration that you put out there is more of like this way of life. Like it's a lifestyle between being nomadic almost and in a spot. You know, the more like on your phone it can be, the more mobile you can be. And I think also at the same time, like the less space we can take up, the better.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be better for the environment in general. Is like the less space that we have to consume as human beings is probably going to be better, because like the plants can grow and the trees can regrow and nature can kind of reclaim itself. Because something that you mentioned earlier was, you know, the global warming aspect of all of this, and just being humans in general. We know that like it's December 26th and it hasn't snowed here yet.
Right.
That's crazy to me. We have historically we have had really cold winters, and we would have snow a month ago, and we would like continue to have snow clear until probably April. I remember several times on a consistent basis that, you know, we would have snow for Easter. It would happen. And it's like, I listened to NPR podcasts about the polar ice caps melting, and they have visuals of the icebergs that are up there and what they looked like in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and just how exponentially things are melting because of the global warming aspect. And it's like, at what point do we go James Webb Space Telescope on this and like point our efforts in the right directions, as opposed to, and I keep going back to the show last night, because it is the perfect representation as what happens in our world is we just don't care until it's too late.
Right.
Like we always have to learn the hard way.
Well, and also, yeah,
I don't want to say always, but it's like we tend to learn the hard way.
Yeah. It's easy to be distracted. It's easy to say like, well, what's one more thing, right? Like if you're in the 99%, there's only so much you can literally do. You could vote, you know, and I don't even see our politicians really taking that, you know, we have a voice. That is what we can do. And we should be using our voice. We should be using our vote to push for these things that we need. And then the people that have the power, they're not really interested in it. And if they're not taking an interest, then it's easy for us to be distracted. I think that's the unfortunate consequence of it all, is it's easier not to do anything about it. You're absolutely right. Like the film.
Yeah, and not do anything about it, and stay super busy doing other things. And like just be distracted. There are a lot of options, and that's the other part too, is like, how lucky are we to have so many options to then like not have to care about global warming? Like we can sit here and do a podcast instead of doing those other things that would help that effort. Or is this helping that effort? Those are like the types of things that I think about.
We are talking about it.
Yeah, so it's like that's part of it.
People will hear our voice and they'll be encouraged. And yeah, I mean, NFTs obviously have a connection. And you know, I had done a little research back earlier this year, and there was this guy who had this website, NFTs WTF, and then that he'd posted that late 2020, and then it got picked up in March by Wired, and it went kind of viral that like, oh my god, like NFTs, one NFT burns all of the electricity of Ecuador. Like it was kind of outrageous. And then that guy kind of said, well, actually it's really hard to prove the carbon footprint of anything, and my numbers were clearly way off, right? And we had to go through that as well, kind of like, okay, so if Steve were in a normal year without a pandemic, if he were to fly to 3 different international cities and ship artwork to those cities, what's the carbon footprint of that versus making a limited edition of NFTs? You know, so we had to, you know, and I couldn't find what is the carbon footprint. You know,
I wanted to find out the carbon footprint of owning a cat.
Oh yeah?
I wanted to do it because I kept getting this argument that like NFTs are bad for the environment, crypto is bad for the environment. And I'm like, and I was thinking like, what's the most ridiculous thing that people own that they probably don't even think about taking care of, but has a huge carbon footprint? And I was like, pets.
Yeah.
Pets. Everybody loves their pet, but you got
Right.
to ship their food to you. If like you're like me and you got a subscription to Chewy, you ship the food to you, you ship the litter to you, you expose of the litter. So then you are putting it into a bag, and then you're putting that bag into a trash can, and that trash can into a truck, and that truck into a landfill. Like,
Right.
we have to gas everything along the
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
to create the trash bag, to
Yeah.
create the truck, to create the can. Like,
Yeah.
what it all adds to this thing, like, just like we were talking about earlier, how arbitrarily we've said that this money is worth something. We've arbitrarily said that we have to put this trash in a bag, in a can,
Yeah.
into a truck,
Right.
into the landfill. Like, we've all decided that that's a thing, and we're going to do that. um I think that just as much as we do that with trash, we can do that with anything. Just like a space telescope, we've
Yeah.
globally collaborated
Right.
for 20 years and put something into space to do space exploration. Like, we've all decided that that's okay, but we can't seem to decide on a way forward with the global warming. Like, we just haven't figured it out, and I'm having trouble understanding why that is, because it
Right.
seems pretty simple. Like, you just reduce output
Yeah.
and more trees and plants grow, and nature reclaims itself.
Yeah, we need more scientists, clearly. I'm trying to get my son to do that. He's like, I could code games for my career. And I'm like, or you could like invent something that saves the world. So study
You
your
could
science.
create a game, code a game that gamifies
Right.
global warming.
Yeah, so we could all figure out the carbon footprint, because yeah, I mean, me too. When people argue about the carbon footprint of NFTs, I'm like, okay, so using your phone, streaming Netflix and YouTube, and sitting on the couch eating a burger, like all of that has a carbon footprint. I mean, burgers, good Lord, we don't need burgers in our lives.
I know. Well, I also work with electric companies. So, like, I know I go to generation facilities and I see the piles of coal, and I see the massive gaping pipes of gas coming into these plants. And I see the hydro turbines, and
Right.
I know what it takes to create enough power for one day
Right.
of our existence. I see what it takes for one day.
Wow.
And it's a massive amount of resources, a massive amount of resources. And when we take so much for granted, and I'm like on a soapbox right now, and I apologize, but
Okay.
it's like, when we leave lights on and we put up Christmas lights, and we like are just so wasteful of the energy that we actually have, it's like stealing. And this is why I think about this, is whenever I was probably 10 years old, I was inside of a mall, and I was in the bathroom, and I washed my hands, and I had, I'd wash my hands and they're all wet, and I go over to the paper towel and I just zing, 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 I pull down a bunch of them. And this old man looks at me, he goes, you're not just wasting that for you. And I said, yeah, I'm not. And then I would think about that with paper towels. I would think about that with water. I would think
Right.
about it with lights. It's like, you're not just wasting it for you. Like,
Right.
you're wasting it for everybody.
Right.
Like, if you're using too much, somebody else isn't getting enough,
That's true. That is true.
because there's only 100%.
So this is like the Star Trek dream, right? Like somehow we all get together and we say, okay, everybody gets their thing, everybody gets their healthcare and their education, and everybody gets fed, and somehow we're together, we're gonna figure this out and make it just perfect. But then that's kind of a weird totalitarian utopia.
It is weird. It's weird to think about it in that respect, because like, we've grown up in a construct that doesn't allow for that type of behavior, because somebody's going to screw it up. Like, somebody's going to be at war with one another, and like, somebody's going to do this. And it's like, we get so caught up in the fictitious maybes that we can't even get past it.
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time in Japan, and I do find the kind of social consciousness, like it's a little creepy. It's a little weird for us Americans who are like, oh, I'm out for me. I'm just going to get what I want. And like, I will pay for what I want because that's what I want. And if somebody else can't pay for what they want, well, tough on them. Right. But in Japan, I mean, it's not socialist, but it is like, I'm going to make sure to clean up after myself so that it's nice for the next person.
Mm-hmm.
I have a duty to like take care of this space because everyone else is enjoying this space. You know, I'm going to only cross the light at the green light because that's the right thing to do. So like there's something really, you know, I do think there's a lot we could learn from that. And, you know, I a year ago, I was actually thinking about moving to Japan because I thought, if anybody's going to figure out this pandemic thing, it'll be them, right? Like you stay home, you mask up, you like stay safe, and yet they've also struggled. So clearly they haven't figured out all the answers.
Sure, but I do love the collectivist versus individualist dichotomy.
Yeah.
In that is, I think that there's a good healthy dose of both things that can be helpful, but it's if you go down that path of collectivism for a little bit, it gets to be it's like you're just part of the community, you know. And this is why I thought this is where you were headed with the Miami thing, because Miami is, they're thinking about creating a token to incentivize like picking up trash, recycling, you know, these things that they want as an initiative, as a community, we'll say, like rewarding things that they want you to do.
That's interesting.
And becoming part of a community and becoming part of an active part of your community, you know. So it's not just doing it because you're supposed to morally, like us, we have to get something all the time. So you get a token for doing these things, like you prove that you did it and then you get a token, and that could be exchanged for maybe bus fare instead of actually paying money. You have this Miami token that you can use for, let's say, a jug of milk because you went and you provided services for homeless people. Like there's just like these really cool social constructs that you can incentivize with tokens that are outside of the money that the taxpayers are giving. It's just more of a tokenomics of your community. And I think it's an interesting way to reward those who just, like you said, it would give people the basic necessities by having them involved in their community, just by keeping it clean and keeping it nice. Then all of your basic needs are done.
No, that's true. And I mean, you know, the collectivism of Japan ends up with this like weird sameness that I think takes out some of the joy, you know. I mean, certainly here in the States, you know, I grew up as a punk rocker. My husband's an artist. My kid is just like a crazy 14-year-old. So like we love expressing ourselves and like
for sure
being, you know, but that's also that kind of like libertarian American, like I'm just out for me and I really don't care about anybody else thing. So there's a find that balance. But I love what you were saying about Miami. These DAOs are really interesting. So like I've been in a bunch of different subcultures, right? I was a punk rocker. I got into like the Vespa scooter world. My husband was a graffiti writer. My dad was in the trans community. I've got, you know, lots of gay family. Like, so all these people that are in like subcultures in my family. And so having our own identity is really important. But what's interesting is that those cultures, one, the internet had an impact on all of it, right? Because we found each other. So like early internet, I was able to, like before that, it was, I would find, you know, some farmer has a Vespa in his barn, and then I would, you know, me and my punk rock friends would try to take it apart and like put it back together again and make it run. But then when the internet happened, it was like, oh, well, now I it was a BBS. I started a Yahoo group for New York scooterists. And it went from like a handful of us that like, you know, we literally used to mail flyers to people. Like we're having an event in Philadelphia, so everybody come meet us at this campsite on this weekend. And so like 50 people might show up, maybe 20. And then the internet happened, and you could say like, oh, hey, there's a scooter rally in Denver. We're all going to fly to Denver and ride Vespas around for a weekend. Like it was like hundreds of people now. So it changed in that 10 years. And same with graffiti. graffiti artists who like it was all word of mouth, and like send letters like, hey, I'm flying to San Francisco in January, I'd love to find some graffiti artists if you know any. And like sleeping on each other's couch. But now the internet happens and they can actually find each other, they can email each other, and they have all this. So one of the things that was interesting was I was in a scooter club, and I've been in a bunch of them, but we were kind of loosely organized. There's no rules. It was a social organization, but we would have events, and then who's going to do what, and there'd be a handful of people who do all of the things. And there were some people who really like, oh, you've got the truck, so you'll bring the firewood, and you're good at running the grill, so you'll do that. So you kind of self-organized. But eventually there would be a crack someplace where somebody doesn't agree with how something's being done, or one person wants it one way. I was always more on the anarchist kind of side of it, like, oh, if we need something to eat, we'll just pass a hat and we'll order some pizzas, like whatever, who cares. Like, I would always try to keep it intentionally less complicated, so that there would be less conflict. And there would be some people who really wanted to organize things and like make it super cool, and it would be really super cool, but and again, someone would disagree with somebody because there's no chain of authority to make those decisions.
Right.
So I find with DAOs, I mean, what I worry about is that as they become more complex, they will need more governing. And that's where, like, my job, I started out, I taught myself how to code as a receptionist, and then I became a producer, and then, eventually managing a team of 80 people at one of the biggest ad agencies in New York. And I like being a leader. I like being a consensus leader. All these DAOs sound fascinating to me, but I don't have the time to invest. I'm a working mom. So there's all this talk about like, oh, the community, and you have to like be part of the community. And I can't do that. I can't, there's a privilege there that I don't have. Right, because I have
Sure.
to work and I want to be there for my son. And I, when I wasn't working, I was on Clubhouse a whole lot. But when I am working, I don't have as much time to invest in the community. And I'd love to be part of one of these DAOs. I think I have a lot to contribute as a kind of consensus leader, but I don't have the time. And if I'm not getting paid for it, then I can't do it. So
Right. What is a consensus leader?
So, I mean, it's a lot of this kind of Gary Vee stuff. Like, I don't lead by authority or fear or threats. I lead by building a team and then mentoring to that team and saying, okay, here's what I think I should do. Here's what I think we should do. Let me know what your thoughts are. But at the end of the day, I'm going to make the decision. But I want to make that decision with everyone's input, making sure that they've all felt heard. And then that hopefully they've understood why I've made the decision I've made. Not just like the CEO who's in the corner who's just like, just do what I said. Because then I do it begrudgingly and undermine even myself by saying like, I don't know why we're doing it this way. Only to find out later that maybe I didn't have all the information, or I haven't felt heard, and I'm going to be unhappy about my job and complaining about it to everybody.
Yeah. And you know what? That's actually an interesting point, is when you don't have the time to be invested, but you trust the team to make the decisions for you. I feel like that's like the evolution of it all. Is, yeah, it's all well and good to have like 10,000 people, we'll say, inside of a project, but really what it comes down to are like 5 or 6 people.
Yes,
that have the time and energy to put into the governance piece of it, to move that project forward. And it's like that's why I think like the NFT space is super cool. And also like it's just the same thing as what we're doing now. It's just on the blockchain, is like, it's still a business for the most part. Like we're still going to have a hierarchy, even inside of Discords. Like there's a hierarchy of roles. Like we can't trust everybody not to, like, we can't give everybody moderator roles. You just, not everybody can be trusted with that. And it's because, I don't know if it's because we've been programmed that way, or like we've went through enough of these organizations that we're like, yeah, you can't give the reins to everybody. You just can't do that, because each individual piece of the puzzle is like the all the pieces have to come together to make
Right.
the puzzle.
Right.
But like there's a few corner pieces that like absolutely have to be there.
Yeah.
Otherwise it just doesn't stick together.
I mean, and it goes for like an orchestra or an army,
Yeah.
like all of those soldiers are important, but unless one person is saying, let's all go this way, or like, hey, you go left and we'll go right, like something, there has to be some leadership to help facilitate the conversation so that
Do you
what we are
think that some
getting at the
people are
group.
more inclined to be those people, or do you think it can be learned?
I think it can be learned. And it could be, I mean, you hear about these articles where it's like, are the people that we currently reward, like the people that become the CEOs, are they really the right people? Um, I had lunch recently with one of the women that reported to me previously, and she's like, yeah, but at the end of the day, wouldn't you rather be liked by the people that work for you than the people you work for? And I was like, oh wow, so I felt like I had gotten to a point that I could not get past, that I did not have what was recognized as leadership qualities at the C level. But I definitely have leadership qualities. I'm pretty, I'll say for myself, as a leader of a large group of people, because I have a I they people believe I'm listening to them, and they trust me to make some of those decisions. And I also do trust in them. Like when I had 80 people reporting to me, I had 10 lieutenants, and each of them had a team. And so I would mentor them, and then they could mentor their teams.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of traditional hierarchy, I think a lot of companies have gone like, oh well, what we're going to do instead is we're going to do a flat organization, and we're going to hire all these young people because they're cheaper. But then frankly, I see them struggle being productive because those young people don't get mentorship, and then those young people also don't see where is they have no one to model where is the next step. But also, when you have this triangle, like honestly, there's only so many seats at the top. And what do you do with somebody like me who's in their 50s and like completely exhausted with my industry? And my dad
You
spent 25 years at the same company, and it's like, all right, well, maybe I need to change careers. Maybe I need to do something different.
right. And I think too, what it also comes back to is what is the goal? Like, is the goal to be the tippy top, or is the goal to have the team and mentor the team and be, because it's also a situation where you have to then reconcile, is it okay for me to be complacent in that role because your background has really intrigued me, because it's very similar to what I've done. Is like I hop around,
Mm,
but I always have like this one thing that I can come back to, which is like my day to day that I find very rewarding.
mm,
So I stay complacent in that. I continue to evolve and I learn, but I can jump around elsewhere as opposed to that. And that's like where I come at it from, is what are we dedicated to in
mm,
our day to day,
mhm.
and can I find fulfillment in my role that, like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to say one way or the other, like if you're good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just
Right.
like, I always wonder why we do the certain things we do. And it's because we have an ultimate goal that we're trying to reach, but why are we trying to reach it? And it's
Mhm.
because of whatever we're dedicated to. And like,
Yeah.
that's where we're going to invest our time and efforts. And if we're not reaching it, then we get upset of this fictitious limitation we put on ourselves,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is, yeah.
Yeah. I think, so going back one question, which was, can you learn it? I would hope that I have been teaching people that work for me how to be a leader. And I
Mm-hmm.
and I think I can see that has played out. Of course, I also hire people, you have a bias to like hire people like you. So that could be also part of it. But you raise a really interesting point about being the work. It's 40 plus hours a week that I put into marketing, digital marketing. And honestly, like what I love about it is I love working with creative, smart, passionate people. I love leading teams and building teams. But but I would feel, I think, more satisfied if I was doing something like working for social justice or working for our environment, and not doing marketing, because and certainly this past year has been an example, that I'm consulting right now and I'm doing work that I don't really feel is making the world a better place. It's just more advertising.
I think that what you just said right there is like amazing to me. Is you're a marketer who's looking for fulfillment, and there are certainly projects out there that could use a great marketer that then you could feel fulfilled and then give it a new, like
Yeah.
like just even global warming or the James Webb Space Telescope, like these things,
Yeah.
they're marketed in a way that's not resonating with everybody.
Yeah, clearly. Yeah,
So
NASA
it's
needs to
like,
hire marketers.
yeah, they need new marketers. They need people like yourself. And maybe that would scratch the itch that you have and help
Yeah,
out in general.
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, thank you. You know, it's interesting. I ended up on a Twitter space with MacGyver recently, and it sounds like she and I might have worked at the same place because we were like, oh yeah, and then we were both bashing marketing, and I don't know whether I don't know her pronouns. I shouldn't say they. So they have picked up a creative practice, obviously, and feeling much more fulfilled than they did as a designer, and they encouraged me to also go find something that would be more satisfying and get out of the marketing business. So it was nice to kind of share that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Wow,
I
you
think
kind
you
of led me to the same place that I am that I had
yeah,
on.
it's like we're all leading you to water. You just got to drink it. That's all. And it's super scary too. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. Like to go completely out and go after something new to pay the bills and all of that is like super scary.
What
Because you
has
have a
kept me
kid and you have a
unloading it.
family and you need to be a provider as well. So like those are some bags that we got to carry, each and every one of us. So
It brings me back to the socialist thing, because if I didn't have to worry, like this Christmas has been a contemplation in what is it that we really need, and we kind of gave each other gifts for the house, and we're really happy.
mhm,
Like I gave my husband an air fryer, like, but it
I
was really,
love it.
but we're all really happy. So, um, there's so little that we need. And back to that movie last night when he was like at the very end and he says, "We really had it all, didn't we?"
Didn't we?
And I will say, I mean, working in marketing has paid very nicely for the last 30 years. So it's not, it's easier said than done to be like, I'm gonna go work for social justice.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know, man. Somebody's got to do it.
That's sort of where I'm at with things is and that's why I keep drawing attention to certain topics that I think are really important, and giving a voice to all those that I possibly can. I seem to be drawn to people like yourself that have come from a background of like just really being curious and sticking with things and like seeing them through and then getting bored
Mm.
because there's no fulfillment in it. And why do we keep not being fulfilled? And it's like we're searching for something. And usually like every time we tick a box, it's like we've upped the ante, but it still wasn't enough fulfillment. So we up the ante again and it's still not enough fulfillment. So like when are we gonna get to that point? And I think sometimes it just takes many, many years to even get the experience to then be ready for that bigger, badder thing.
Right. And I mean, capitalism has us addicted. I mean, between, the phones and everything. Hey, there it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Between the phones and everything else, we always want that rush. What's the next thing? Like, look at something, eat something, buy something. Oh gosh, one of my favorite things though from NFT NYC was a woman who had said, buying is the new liking, which I thought was
Mm-hmm.
really interesting. Um, anyway, I digress. So that sense of constantly needing a thing, but with the pandemic, there was this other part, which is that self-reflection of like, I have everything I need. Like we got through this. I mean, at least from my experience was like, I have a wonderful family. I have a tiny apartment. And even though I didn't have a job, I was consulting and we made it. Like, I maybe didn't need so much. And what did I spend all my money and time on before? Well, I was working so hard. So we were eating out every night and we were traveling a lot because, you know, work hard, play hard. And now it's like, well, now I'm working part-time and still making a reasonable amount of money and enjoying my life a bit more. So
Yeah.
yeah, it comes back to that like renegotiation of like, I'm not just renegotiating with my boss, I'm like renegotiating my whole life. Like, what are my
No, I
priorities?
feel you. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are doing the same thing. And that's why I was curious, like the renegotiation part is, I think we could probably see a lot of companies spending less money overall by hiring new people all the time if you give more flexibility
Yeah.
for people who want to work for you, and with the flexibility they can find fulfillment outside of their job,
Yeah.
which is, I think, really important to, like, when people get rid of the commute an hour there, an hour back, you got 2 hours now in your day that you can focus on your family, you can focus on your
Yeah.
health, you could
Yeah.
find fulfillment in other parts of your life than like the 2 hours in the car. Like, you're definitely not like
Yeah.
maybe you find fulfillment there, I don't know, but I have serious doubts that that's where it's happening.
What I've seen, what was happening last year and even this year when I was consulting was that instead of a 40-hour week, it became a 50-hour week. Like those 2 hours of commuting just became more meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And also because there were less employees, you know, they laid off a bunch of people and then they weren't able to hire back. So there was more work to do, surprisingly. I mean, it was wild last year, when the pandemic first hit, and I would have like one client call up and be like, pencils down, everything. And I'm like, oh shoot, that's like a $10 million client. I've got, you know, 30 people here with nothing to do. And then the next day I'd have a client who said, you know, that campaign we wanted to run 3 months from now, we want to run it tomorrow. You know, and I'd be like, okay, great. These 30 people are now busy again. And so, you know, I think having a job mean for stability, like all that stability was gone. You just never know what your job's going to be tomorrow. And so, you know, my vision earlier this year, I mean, partly I was freelancing because I thought I was going to go to Japan, which didn't really turn out, which is okay. Maybe some other
Mm-hmm.
time I'll go to Japan. But I was working part-time and having the time to do the NFTs and be with my family and take care of myself. And so maybe that's the answer. Maybe the answer is all of the above.
Yeah,
It's
I think it
that
can
roller
be.
coaster again. It's like it's gonna be everything.
Yeah, it can, and it absolutely can be. And I think maybe giving ourselves permission to allow for everything
Hmm.
is also something. Like, I was listening to David Cho the other day on Rick Roll's podcast, and he was like, I was in all of these because he had like a gambling addiction, a sex addiction. And when he was going to these meetings and these treatment centers, he was like, people were like, multi-billionaires were asking permission to use glitter for art projects. And he's like, I think permission is something that we either give ourselves or we don't. And when he was talking about, like, one of the things that triggered in him was a story about when he went out to eat with his father and his brothers at a seafood restaurant. And he said, we went out to eat and my dad told me, he goes, don't order. Seafood can be a little bit expensive. You don't know what you're doing. Just let me order. So when they went into the restaurant, they sat down and the waiter was, asking for everybody's order. And he came to David, and David was like, he wasn't sure what to do. He's looking at his dad. And the waiter says, well, here's, fresh lobster. They're fresh today. And do you want one of these? And David said, yeah. And so the waiter took his order. He went back. The waiter left. So it was just David, his brothers, and his dad. And his brothers were like, you idiot. Like, why would you do that? And his dad said, they're very expensive. Why would you do something like that? I told you not to do that. So that stuck with him. He goes, well, why don't you just call the waiter back? I'll just cancel it. And he goes, well, then we'll look poor. And like, we don't want that either. So he's like, as a 6-7-year-old, he's feeling all that guilt. And he goes, and that has stuck with him. He's 30 something, 40 something years old, and he's in this treatment facility. And he goes, I didn't even want to tell that story because it failed in comparison to everybody else's story that was there. So I didn't even feel like I had permission to say what was bothering me because
Mm,
I felt like it was so stupid compared to everybody else.
mm,
And it was like, no, what your pain is your pain, your fulfillment is your fulfillment. It's yours. It's your perspective. So like giving ourselves permission to enjoy what we're enjoying, despite what the outside world is telling us to enjoy, is a gift if you can receive it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I was feeling a need to like have a full-time job so that I could get the health insurance and have a steady paycheck. But we did okay this year. And honestly, I'm not even convinced that the health insurance that you get from the corporations it's not even that good anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You still pay, it comes out of your paycheck, and you still have high deductibles. And I mean, the whole health insurance. So that's having health insurance is not a good enough reason
Right.
to like go have a full-time job that maybe I'm not excited about. I mean, there's definitely some jobs that I'm excited about, and we'll see if I can find.
Definitely. Well, I'm excited to see what happens for you this next year. And I'm so happy that we've connected, and I have a friend in you now, and like just kind of understanding your background and where you're headed, and kind of how our minds align a bit is really fun. So if anybody wanted to follow you or follow the project that you're working on, where could they find that at? And
sure. I'm on Twitter at NiftyDreaming. So, and I have not changed that. And so that's also on Instagram and OpenSea, Nifty Dreaming. So
perfect.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, we'll see. Next year is going to be really exciting. This NFT stuff it's really interesting. I'm into it for the art. If I could figure out how, I can't get excited about like trying to do it as just for the money. But I've bought a few pieces that I like and I believe in, and I think that's how anybody should approach it. We'll see what happens.
Absolutely.
I get some crypto and I get excited about that whenever I see ETH go up, and I bought in early, so I'm still holding on to believing that ETH is going to be the one. But
yeah,
who knows? Maybe it'll be the Doge that saves the day.
Who knows? I always say just follow the projects and follow the leaders involved in the projects. Read the white papers. Always look at what the project's actually about. It'll help you doing your research.
It'll be interesting to see where we are 6 months from now when the Webb telescope reaches its
well, I'll tell you this, we will be having a view party again. We did a view party at our metaverse parcel and in crypto voxels, and I put it up on the big screen. We had NASA live viewing, and I'm like, this is so cool. I can't wait to like keep doing the progression of the telescope and being able to see those images. And even just the clarity of the images that are going to come back that we already know about is going to be incredible. So Marianne, thank you so much for joining me today.
Indeed.
Yes, I want to see the Big Bang, and I want to see what comes out of that Big Bang, because there's going to be more Goldilocks galaxies out there that we're going to see. That's all there is to it. All right. Enjoy.
Take care. Bye.
Absolutely. As always, guys, enjoy the journey. Bye. Thank you so much for sticking here until the very, very end. If you wouldn't mind just leaving a comment or subscribing or liking the podcast or wherever you downloaded this, maybe it was from YouTube, I would love for that. You take an extra couple seconds to give us some more love, even though you have listened here to the very, very end. We appreciate that so much. Could you also go over to thestarspodcast.com if you found any of this really interesting and you wanted to dive in a little bit further, or go to our Discord, which is Rocinante Studios NFT. Enjoy the journey.